Hey, Soul Stories fam. We're about to begin a brand new love journey. Comment where you're watching from so we can see that our Soul Stories family is all around the world. Please, sir, please read this letter. It's very important. The trembling voice of a little girl echoed through the grand lobby of Whitmore Tech, a glass tower gleaming like a beacon of power and wealth in the heart of downtown Seattle. Emma, 7 years old, stood lost among a sea of neatly dressed people in suits, all rushing across the polished marble floor. Above, a massive crystal chandelier cast a cold glow over the paneled wooden walls. The luxury of the place only made her seem smaller, more fragile. Emma wore a simple cotton dress, faded with age, and scuffed shoes with worn-out heels. Her heart thudded in her chest, but her tiny hands clutched a wrinkled envelope tightly. Its corners were curled, stained with sweat from being held for too long, as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. The receptionist looked up, startled to see a child standing alone. "Sweetheart, are you lost? This is a workplace. Do you have an appointment?" Emma drew in a deep breath, her clear blue eyes shining with courage. "No, ma'am. But I need to see Mr. Edward Whitmore. I must give him this letter. My mom said, this is the most important thing." The entire lobby fell silent. Even the employees hurrying past stopped to glance back. A child daring to stand in the middle of such an imposing building, demanding to see the most powerful man in the city? The receptionist hesitated, trying to explain, when suddenly the large revolving door swung open. Edward Whitmore walked in. He strode across the lobby, tall and commanding in a tailored gray suit. His face was sharp, every line carved with success and authority. The sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows behind him reflected off his figure, making him seem untouchable, someone few would dare to approach. And yet, he stopped, because right there in the center of the lobby, a little girl stood, gazing up at him with shimmering blue eyes. Eyes that looked exactly like his, so alike that his heart stalled, his breath caught in his chest. Edward walked closer, his leather shoes echoing on the marble floor. He studied her small face, the features, the stubborn tilt of her chin. Every detail struck him like a memory from a long ago time. The receptionist quickly said, "Mr. Whitmore, this little girl wants to see you." He gave a curt nod and stepped forward, lowering himself to meet her gaze. His deep, husky voice softened without meaning to. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma," she whispered, her hands trembling as she held the envelope against her chest. "Please, sir, please read this letter. It's very important." Edward reached out and took it. The wrinkled envelope quivered in his cold palm. On the front, in crooked handwriting, were the words, "To Edward Whitmore, personal, urgent." He tightened his grip on it, his gaze never leaving the child. Something strange stirred within him, like the steel walls he had built around himself for years were suddenly cracking. Edward's deep blue eyes locked on hers. "You came here all by yourself? No one came with you?" Emma nodded, clutching her tiny fists. "Yes, I came alone. Mom doesn't know. She's very weak. I was afraid she would be sad if she knew I snuck out. Mom told the neighbor that if one day she wasn't here anymore, I should be brought here to give you this letter. But she's sick, and she said this was the one thing she worried about before she died. I was so scared, so I came on my own, so she wouldn't have to worry anymore. If I waited until later to give you this letter, then she would never know you got it. I want her to feel at peace while she's still alive." Her clear voice trembled, but her gaze remained steady. "I was scared. It was my first time riding the bus alone. But I thought my mom must be even more scared than I am. So I had to do this for her so she wouldn't worry anymore." Edward froze. A 7-year-old child, saying words so heavy with meaning. He clenched the letter in his hand, feeling a sharp crack deep in his heart. Around them, every sound seemed to fade. Only the pounding of his heartbeat in the burning envelope in his palm remained. Could a single letter really change fate? And could a little girl really bring him the truth he had once denied? Edward inhaled deeply, then slowly opened the envelope. Edward's hand trembled slightly as he tore open the yellowed envelope. A faint scent rose from the paper inside, a gentle lavender fragrance, so familiar that it made his heart skip. It had been years, yet a single scent was enough to pull him back into the past. The handwriting slanted across the page, each stroke unsteady and blotchy, as if written in utter exhaustion. He read slowly. Each line felt like a knife cutting into his chest. Edward, if this letter has reached you, then I may no longer be with you. I don't know how you will react. I only beg that you read it to the end, even if only this once. My name is Clara. I am the woman you once loved, the one you left because of misunderstandings and silence. I do not write this letter to demand or to blame, but simply to tell you the truth. Emma is our daughter. She is 7 years old and has the same blue eyes as you. Every time I look into her eyes, the past rushes back. I see you. I see the love we once had. Edward, she is well-behaved, brave, and intelligent, but she is still so small. I do not know who will protect her when I am gone. Edward stopped, his vision suddenly blurring. He glanced at the little girl still standing beside him, her empty arms folded as if awaiting judgment. Emma? His daughter? He continued reading, his heart heavy. I know I do not have much time left. The cruel illness is taking my strength day by day. The doctors say I have only months, perhaps less. I have fought with all my might, but now I am no longer afraid of death for myself. The only thing I fear is Emma becoming an orphan. I beg you, Edward, please open your heart. Look at her once and recognize the truth. I need nothing for myself. I only hope you will be a pillar for Emma, so she will have a family and know she was not abandoned. I know doctors told you that you could not have children, but please believe me. Emma is the clearest proof. Look at her. I trust you will see. Edward flinched. The letter shook in his hand. Yes. 8 years ago, he remembered exactly the day the doctor handed him the test results and spoke coldly. You are infertile. That shock had crushed all his faith, love, and the future he had imagined. And then cruelly at that same time, Rachel, Clara's close friend, who had always stood beside him, whispered proof that Clara had betrayed him. Photographs, rumors, anonymous messages, all strung together like a verdict condemning Clara. He believed it. He turned his back and left without looking back. Now Clara was saying Emma was his child. Edward, I do not have the strength to explain the past. I do not have the time to wait for you to believe or not believe in me. I only want our child not to grow up in fear and loss. If there is anything in you that still remembers me, I beg you, love Emma as I once loved you. I cannot say more, only that my heart has never stopped turning toward you, even though for 8 years I have lived in the shadows. Clara. Edward's hand squeezed the crumpled letter until it creased. His throat tightened. The world seemed to collapse. He looked up and caught Emma's gaze clear, trembling yet full of hope. He could see it clearly, the shape of the face, the blue eyes, even the way she squeezed her hands to summon courage. All of it mirrored how he had looked as a child. His heart raced, his reason shattered. If he truly were infertile, then why did that child resemble him so much? The iron gate of the old apartment complex groaned open with a long creak, the scrape of metal against metal sounding like an omen of what was about to unfold. The narrow hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant mixed with neighbors' evening cooking. Fluorescent tubes flickered above, throwing alternating patches of light and shadow across cracked walls. Edward held Emma's hand. Her tiny palm was warm but trembling, while his own felt cold with anticipation. Apartment 3B, Emma whispered, tilting her face up to him. Mom's home. Her voice was like a fragile thread guiding him forward, past all the doubts and fears tightening around him. He stopped before a pale blue wooden door, its paint peeling in patches like scales of old memories. He drew a deep breath. Why was his heart pounding so violently? Could a thin door like this really stand between him and the 8 lost years? He knocked softly, 3 times, clear, slow, hollow. The door creaked open. A thin woman stood in the frame, the yellow light behind her forming a faint halo around her hair that had grown sparse. Clara. The face that had haunted his fractured dreams now appeared. Pale, worn, yet carrying a strange calm. Her cheeks were sunken, her skin almost translucent. but her eyes still burned. Eyes that knew how to smile, to weep, and to remain steadfast. For a moment no one spoke. 8 years of silence fell heavy across the threshold. "Edward," Clara murmured, her voice hoarse as if weathered by a long, cold wind. She glanced down and met Emma's blue gaze. A faint smile flickered across her lips, warm yet aching. "Daughter, you're home." Emma rushed into her arms, burying her face in a worn sweater. "Mom, I gave him the letter. I gave it to Mr. Edward myself." She looked up, her eyes shining as if rejoicing. "I did it like you asked, while you're still here." Clara held her close, then raised her gaze. That look brushed against Edward like the reopening of an old wound. "Come in," she said, stepping back to let him through. The apartment was unexpectedly tidy and small. A chipped ceramic vase held wild daisies on the table. Children's crayon drawings were taped to the refrigerator. In the corner sat a faded fabric armchair with a knitted blanket draped over it. The modest warmth of the place seemed to whisper, "Here, love had stayed, even in poverty." Edward stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, his eyes scanning every detail until they landed on the rows of medicine bottles arranged neatly beside a cup of warm water. His throat tightened. Illness had a shape, small, silent pills, swallowing away someone's days. Why was he only here now? "Sit down," Clara offered, setting a kettle on the stove. The gas lit with a whoosh. Her movements were slow but practiced. Only her hand trembled slightly as she turned the knob. Edward almost stepped forward to help, but froze, caught between instinct and distance. Emma tugged at his sleeve. Edward, sit here. This is Mom's favorite spot. The afternoon sun shines so pretty here." She spoke as if to smooth over the adult's unease. He sat, folding his hands together to hide his restlessness. Clara placed a teacup before him. "All I have is ginger tea. I hope you don't mind." Her smile was thin, like the rim of the cup. For a moment, Edward saw her as she once was. The same hands, the same tea that had comforted him after long days. How could something feel both foreign and familiar? Emma climbed into a chair opposite, her legs swinging. "Mom, I told him everything. I told him I was scared you would. She faltered, biting her lip. Clara stroked her hair, whispering, "It's all right. I'm here." Only then did Clara turn fully to Edward, gathering all her strength. No circles, no defenses, just the raw truth. "I don't need your forgiveness, Edward," she began. "I only ask that you think of Emma." The words fell between them like water soaking into dry earth. No blame, no self-defense, only one plea: the child. Edward looked at Clara, then at Emma, who tried to appear grown up but twisted her fingers nervously. He swallowed hard, his voice rough. "I read the letter." "Then I have nothing left to say about myself," Clara answered, her eyes fixed on her daughter. "Emma needs a father. If tomorrow, or next week, or next month, I can no longer walk her to school, no longer soothe her when she's sick, I want her to have a place to return to, a safe place. Can you give her that?" Edward wanted to say yes, as easy as breathing, but part of him still clenched. 8 years ago, doctors had declared him infertile. 8 years ago, photographs, rumors, anonymous messages had all conspired into a verdict that Clara had betrayed him. Clara's honesty today pulled him toward belief, yet old scars knew how to sting at the worst moments. Believe or not believe. His heart urged him to say yes. His reason urged him to wait. He looked at Emma and suddenly saw his own childhood staring back. Her gentle stubbornness, the nervous habit of touching her ear, even the small mole beneath her left eye. A resemblance so striking it made his knees weak. If he truly could not father a child, then why did this little girl look so unmistakably like him? "I will take responsibility for Emma," he finally said, each word deliberate. "At least, until everything is clear." His tone was guarded, but inside he had already leaned toward belief. He added quietly, almost pleading, "I want to believe you. But please, give me some time." Clara nodded. "I understand." She turned to her daughter. "Emma, go get your sketchbook to show him. Didn't you say you drew the house with 3 people?" Emma's eyes lit up, and she scurried off into the small bedroom, the sound of pages flipping like little wings. When only the two of them remained, the room felt tighter with unspoken words. Clara gripped the tablecloth's edge, her thin nails pressing lightly. "Edward," she whispered, "I know you have every right to doubt. I don't want to justify myself. I only ask three things. First, a DNA test. You choose the hospital, you supervise it. Second, if the result hurts you, let the pain stay with us adults. Don't let her see it. And third, whatever the outcome, don't vanish like you did 8 years ago." She smiled faintly, a salt-stained smile at the corners of her eyes. "I'm weaker than before and Emma is stronger than I imagined. But she's still just a child." Edward was silent. Those three requests carried no mention of forgiveness, no demand for herself, only Emma, and how the girl would bear the truth. This was how a mother at the edge of life spoke. No embellishment, no demands, only her whole heart placed in her child. Emma returned, waving her sketchbook above her head. "Here it is!" She opened to a colorful page, a house with a large window, flowers on the balcony, and three people holding hands. A blonde mother, a tall man with dark hair, and a smiling blue-eyed girl. Above it, in careful letters, "Our home." Edward's eyes stung. He swallowed hard, but his voice was still rough. "It's beautiful, Emma. Do you think it looks like you?" she asked, tilting her head. "I drew you tall because Mom said you were tall. And I made your eyes blue because I think—" She hesitated, then rushed out in one breath, as if afraid she'd run out of time. "Because I think you have eyes like mine." Edward let out a choked laugh, half tear, half joy. He nodded. "Yes, very much alike." The afternoon slipped by in little fragments. Emma talked about school, her one-eared stuffed rabbit, the first time she cooked thin porridge for her mom. Clara spoke of her rooftop garden, where she breathed fresh air after bouts of nausea from the medicine. Edward listened, each story tying him closer to the two of them. Was happiness really this simple? A small kitchen, scattered stories, and a child's laughter? Before leaving, Edward rose, hesitant. "I'll arrange the DNA test as soon as possible," he said, his eyes steady on Clara. "I want everything to be clear, and tomorrow I'll take both of you in for a full checkup. No arguments, all right?" He smiled, his first real smile of the afternoon. "Give me a chance to do a few things right." Clara pressed her lips together, nodding. Her gaze softened, shimmering like water about to spill. "Thank you." At the door, Emma suddenly hugged him tight. The embrace was unexpected, strong and warm. "I knew you'd help, Mom," she whispered into his chest, her words an offering of trust. "Because I think you're a good man." Edward bent down, hugging her back, his hand patting her small back. "I'll try to be the good man you think I am," he murmured, voice thick with emotion. The door closed behind him. The hallway still smelled of disinfectant. The fluorescent light still flickered. Edward stood there for a long time, his hand pressed to his chest as if trying to steady the frantic beat of his heart. Believe or not believe? The man of reason whispered, "Do the test." But the heart, locked away for 8 years, spoke softly, "Believe." And between those two voices, Emma's blue eyes cut a bright line through all the darkness within him. If he truly were infertile, then why did that child look so much like him? The city sky that day hung heavy and gray, like a thick veil draped over everything. Edward sat in his office on the 40th floor, twirling his fountain pen in restless fingers, unable to focus on the contract spread out before him. Clara's pale face and Emma's clear blue eyes kept flashing in his mind, refusing to let him go. There had to be a clear answer. He needed to know, not only for himself, but for the child who had looked up at him with such fierce trust and called him uncle. That afternoon, Edward arranged to meet Clara and Emma at a reputable medical center, one he trusted completely. Clara sat in the hallway, her hair loosely tied back, her face drawn and tired, yet her eyes still unyielding. She said nothing, only gripped her daughter's hand tightly. "Don't worry, Mom," Emma whispered softly. "I'm not scared. I just want Mr. Edward to know the truth." Edward watched them, a lump forming in his throat. He gave a slight nod. We'll do the DNA test. Let's make everything clear. Clara inhaled deeply, her voice trembling but firm. I don't need your forgiveness, Edward. I only want, when I'm no longer here, that Emma has somewhere to belong. The results will prove everything. He nodded again, but a storm of unease swelled in his chest. Meanwhile, across town, Rachel clutched her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. News had reached her that Edward was taking Clara and Emma for a DNA test. Her sharp eyes flickered with panic. She couldn't let this happen. Edward could never know the truth. For 8 years, she had fought and schemed to secure her place. Once Clara's dear friend, Rachel had twisted everything, planting rumors, crafting evidence, even enlisting doctors to convince Edward he was infertile. And he had believed it. He had turned his back on Clara. If the truth were to surface now, everything would collapse. Edward would despise her. Rachel paced the polished wooden floors of her luxurious apartment, her heels striking like a countdown of fate. She stopped abruptly and dialed a familiar number. It's me. I need something done, she said, her voice low and icy. On the other end, a man's voice groaned. I risked everything last time. What more do you want? Simple, Rachel replied, her lips curling as her eyes glittered with malice. I want the DNA test to come back negative. You understand me, don't you? Silence. Then the man's heavy breathing filled the line. If I'm caught, I'll lose my job. Rachel smiled coldly. You won't lose a thing. I'll make sure you have enough money that you'll never need to work again. Another pause, long and suffocating, then finally. Fine. Rachel hung up and sank onto her leather sofa, her hands still trembling slightly. She leaned her head back, staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding. Edward, you'll never know. Never. On the day of the test, everything seemed normal. Emma sat bravely on the chair as the nurse drew her blood. She even smiled, gripping Clara's hand. See, Mom? I'm brave, aren't I? Clara stroked her daughter's hair, her lips curving into a smile while her eyes glistened with tears. Edward stood close by, his gaze fixed on the two of them. He said nothing, but his fists clenched in the pockets of his suit. Just a few more days, he thought. Then everything would be clear. The truth would either bring peace or unleash a storm. He didn't know that in that very laboratory, Rachel's invisible hand was already reaching in, ready to twist the truth once again. That evening, Rachel appeared at Edward's apartment. She had chosen a sleek black dress and painted her lips a soft red, every detail curated to look like the caring, attentive partner she pretended to be. Not a trace of fear showed on her polished face. You look tired, Rachel murmured gently as she sat beside him, pouring a glass of wine. Another stressful day at work. Edward gave a small nod, keeping his tone neutral. Same as usual. Rachel placed her hand on his arm, her eyes filled with manufactured tenderness. Don't push yourself too hard. You've carried too much for too long. Edward glanced at her briefly, his expression unreadable. He didn't know that behind that gentle smile, Rachel's insides quaked with fear. Yet in her heart she whispered, let him believe I know nothing. The truth is already mine to control. The days waiting for the DNA results stretched longer than years. Edward had never imagined time could feel so heavy, so agonizingly slow. He buried himself in work as usual, but every time his eyes wandered to the office window, Clara's pale face and Emma's clear blue eyes returned to haunt him, making contracts and numbers feel meaningless. He began seeking out Emma as a way to ease the waiting. At first, it was only a few hours in the afternoon, but soon it became entire weekends. Using the excuse of wanting to get used to her before the results came, he took Emma to the park near her home, bought her ice cream, or simply sat with her on a bench, listening to her cheerful chatter. One afternoon, the park was alive with laughter. Children ran around the slide, their voices carrying beneath the shade of tall maples. Edward sat on a bench, the ice cream in his hand slowly melting. Beside him, Emma licked her cone and chirped away. One time, when Mom was really sick, I had to cook porridge for her all by myself. It was way too salty, but she still smiled and said it was the best thing she'd ever eaten. Her voice was bright, but her eyes dimmed as she continued. At night, when she coughs a lot, I sit by her bed and wipe the sweat off her face. I'm so scared she'll fall asleep and never wake up again. So I just sit there, watching her breathe. Edward's throat tightened. He set the cone aside and gently stroked Emma's hair. Her tiny hand reached up, holding his in return, so warm that he instinctively wanted to hold on forever. Emma tilted her head, her innocent blue eyes piercing straight through him. "Mr. Edward?" "Yes?" He kept his tone calm, though his heart stuttered. If you could, would you be my dad?" Edward froze. That simple, childlike question sliced straight through the steel wall around his heart. He turned his face away, afraid she would see the redness in his eyes. "Emma!" His voice came out hoarse. "Why would you ask me that?" The little girl lowered her gaze, then answered shyly, "Because you look like me. The eyes, the hair. And when I'm with you, I'm not scared of anything. I think if you were my dad, maybe Mom wouldn't worry so much." Edward bit down on his lip, his chest pounding wildly. 8 years ago, he had believed he could never father a child, had believed Clara had betrayed him. But now, sitting beside this little girl, every bit of logic crumbled. Her gaze, her gestures, her words, everything mirrored him so closely it was undeniable. He turned back, looking into her eyes as though searching for the right words. But the only promise he could manage was, "I'll do my very best. Will that be enough for you?" Emma's face lit up with a smile so radiant it seemed to chase away every lingering shadow. She threw her arms around him, small but full of warmth. Edward hugged her back, and for the first time in years, he truly felt the presence of a warmth he had long denied himself. That evening, Edward walked Emma home. Clara stood by the window, the golden lamplight spilling over her fragile features. She saw her daughter step inside with a beaming smile, Edward quietly following behind, his eyes carrying something she had never seen in him 8 years ago, a trace of gentleness. Clara didn't speak. She only gave a small nod, as if offering silent thanks. Edward answered with a brief glance before turning away. But inside, he knew something had shifted. He understood this much. No matter what the DNA results said, his heart had already begun to melt. And this time, he wasn't sure he could ever walk away again. The last traces of sunset faded along the horizon, leaving the city wrapped in the cold glitter of glass towers. Lonely lighthouses rising above a sea of night. In the penthouse at the very top, Edward Whitmore sat motionless by the floor-to-ceiling window. His gaze drifted down to the glowing streets far below, though his mind was elsewhere. Emma's voice still echoed inside him. "Can you be my dad?" The innocent question had shattered through the walls of ice he had built for 8 long years. For the first time in what felt like forever, he no longer felt like the untouchable CEO of Whitmore Tech. He felt simply like a man, aching for the warmth of a family. The door opened with a quiet click. Rachel stepped inside, her expensive perfume flooding the room like a familiar tide. She carried a bottle of red wine and 2 sparkling crystal glasses. With a practiced smile, she said gently, "I thought you might need a relaxing evening." Edward gave a faint nod, though his thoughts were far away. Rachel poured the wine, then slipped behind him, draping her arms around his shoulders. "I saw you today, walking with a little girl. Is she Clara's child?" Edward's brow furrowed. Her voice was smooth, her smile soft, but beneath the sweetness, he felt the glint of a hidden blade. With a sigh, he set the glass down. "Her name is Emma," Clara says. "She's my daughter." For the briefest moment, Rachel's smile froze. Then she recovered, sitting beside him, her voice dripping with honey. "Edward, do you remember what the doctors once told you? You can't have children. Don't let Clara exploit your kindness again." Edward's chest tightened. Yes, 8 years ago that diagnosis had crushed his hope of fatherhood. But then came the image of Emma's eyes, crystal blue, so much like his own. Rachel watched his hesitation, sensing her words hadn't pierced deep enough. She leaned closer, her tone silken, yet edged with venom. "I know you're a good man, but Clara, she's only clinging to you. If what you want is a family, I can provide that for you. I can give you a real home." Her words stabbed at an old wound. Edward lifted his gaze, uncertainty clouding his eyes. On one hand, Rachel, the woman who had been by his side these 8 long years. On the other hand, Clara's trembling letter and Emma's innocent courage, both still burning in his memory. He rose abruptly and walked back to the window, staring out over the blurred ocean of city lights. If I'm truly infertile, he thought, then why does that child look so much like me? Rachel followed, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her voice was soft, almost pleading, yet sharpened by calculation. Be rational, Edward. You are the CEO of Whitmore Tech. You can't let some vague past ruin our future. Trust me, Clara is deceiving you all over again. Edward turned, meeting Rachel's eyes. What did he see there? Devotion and loyalty, or fear of losing everything she had built beside him? In that suspended moment, Edward realized he was trapped in a war within himself. Would he place his faith in the whispers of the woman who had stood at his side for 8 years? Or would he believe the gaze of a child, a stranger, yet one who carried his face, his eyes, his soul? The question hung between them, heavier than any accusation, more piercing than any blade. Soul Stories fam, if you're watching on another channel, come home to us at Soul Stories, where tens of thousands of listeners and sharers come together. The envelope lay on the table, cold and small, yet heavy as a verdict. Edward slid a finger beneath the seal, every movement taut as a wire. Across from him, Clara sat with her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white, her eyes fixed on his every motion. Emma pressed herself against her mother's side, her blue eyes glistening with fear. The paper slid free, its rustle loud in the suffocating silence. Black letters stood out, stark and merciless. Conclusion. No biological paternity relationship exists between Sample A, Edward Whitmore, and Sample B, Emma Cromwell. The air in the room seemed to drop into a bottomless pit. Clara swayed, her heart seizing. Emma cried out, "Mommy!" before breaking into sobs. Edward's face hardened, both hands crumpling the paper until it wrinkled under his grip. He shot up from his chair, sending it crashing backward. The scrape of its legs screeched across the floor. His eyes blazed red as his voice cracked open. So it's this game again? 8 years wasn't enough, Clara? And now, again. Clara sat frozen, tears pouring down her cheeks. Every ounce of strength drained away, leaving her with only 3 broken words. I'm sorry. It wasn't an excuse nor a denial, only the shattering cry of a soul in despair. Edward wanted to shout again, to release 8 years of fury bottled inside him. But Emma's eyes, those lost blue eyes so achingly like his own, stared up at him, wide with fear, her hand creeping toward her ear in a nervous gesture. She sobbed, her voice fractured. Please, don't be mad at my mom. I'm begging you. Edward sank to one knee, his hand settling on her tiny shoulder, his chest aching as though gripped in a vice. He swallowed hard, forcing his voice steady. No, Emma, you did nothing wrong. None of this is your fault. But the words negative result hammered in his ears like a judge's gavel. Every sob from Emma, every tear from Clara, only deepened the wound. Once again, he was standing on the same cliff. Betrayal, broken trust, torn between love and suspicion. Edward's jaw tightened. He folded the result sharply, stuffing it back into the envelope, as if locking away a roaring beast. His voice was flat, frightening in its calm. I'll drive you both home. Rain pattered faintly as he dropped Clara and Emma in front of the old apartment. Clara whispered a thin thank you, as though clinging to it, then led Emma up the stairwell. The iron door closed. Edward lingered beside his car, rain speckling his shoulders. He didn't return to the office. He didn't go home. Instead, he dialed the only number he could bear to call. Mike, are you free? His voice was rough, clipped. Edward, at this hour. The old bar, half an hour. The bar was low-ceilinged, its yellow light dim, steeped in the smell of soaked wood and old liquor. Dr. Michael Harrison, Edward's closest friend since college, now an internist, was already waiting at their corner table, sleeves rolled, eyes filled with concern. What's burning down this time? Edward dropped the envelope onto the table and ordered a whiskey, neat. DNA. Negative. He downed the drink in one swallow, the burns searing his throat. And me? He let out a dry laugh. Back on stage, the fool again. Mike didn't touch the envelope immediately. Instead, he studied Edward's face. How much do you actually believe that result? I want to believe it, to stop hurting, but I can't. Edward poured himself another, his voice raw. Emma, she looks so much like me. Her eyes, her face. She's allergic to peanuts. Just like me, her throat burns from just the smell. When she's nervous, she touches her ear. He smirked bitterly, tapping his own earlobe. Same thing I did as a kid. Today I saw it again. And she's me, Mike, a mirror from childhood. Mike nodded slowly. Then two possibilities. One, technical error, mislabeled samples, contamination, chain of custody mistake. Two, deliberate interference. He lowered his voice. Do you have reason to believe someone would want that result to be negative? A name surfaced in Edward's mind. Rachel, slick as oil, dark as ink. He didn't speak it. His eyes drilled into the table instead. 8 years ago, remember the infertility diagnosis? Everything lined up too neatly, too perfectly. Mike tapped 2 fingers on the envelope like a heartbeat. In theory, paternity tests are almost foolproof. But the chain of custody, that's the weak link. One loose grip, and the result's garbage. And people can be bribed. Look, your instincts are screaming the opposite of this paper. I trust your instincts more than this printout. Edward leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. Rain drummed the skylight above. Every step in the process had cracks wide enough for someone's hand to slip through. He opened his eyes, his tone calmer but iron hard. Help me redo it, quietly, at an independent lab. You oversee the chain of custody yourself, and, he tilted his head, we'll run it in 2 labs side by side. Cross-check. Mike nodded firmly. Tomorrow, I'll book the earliest slot. Your sample, the girl's sample. Her mother's isn't mandatory, but with a trio analysis, it's airtight. But Edward, his eyes softened, whatever happened 8 years ago, you need to brace yourself. The truth you're digging for may not be kind. Edward's mouth twisted into a humorless smile. I already lived 8 years with a kind lie. Time to face the painful truth. Mike slid a glass of water across to him, like offering a lifeline. One more thing, get some sleep tonight. Tomorrow you'll need a clear head. Edward nodded, scooping the envelope back up. Before leaving, he gripped his friend's shoulder. Thank you. The 2 men clasped hands. A brief, heavy squeeze. Outside, the rain had thinned, and streetlights stretched into long, golden streaks across the wet pavement. Edward pulled out his phone. A new message blinked from Rachel. Are you okay? I'm here if you need me. He stared at it for a beat, then locked the screen. He didn't reply. The white envelope sat on the table like a ticking bomb. Edward stared at it in silence, his hands clasped so tightly that the knuckles had turned white. The room was so still that the ticking of the clock struck like a hammer. Finally, he tore through the seal with a violent motion. The paper slid out. Bold black letters screamed at him. Conclusion. Probability of biological paternity between sample A, Edward Whitmore, and sample B, Emma Cromwell, is 99.97%. For a moment, Edward's heart exploded in his chest. Emma, she really was his daughter. His entire body trembled, whether from joy or from the unbearable pain of the truth finally breaking open. He couldn't tell. 8 years. 8 years trapped in the prison of a false diagnosis. 8 years doubting Clara, resenting her. 8 years robbed of fatherhood. And all of it because of a lie. A guttural roar tore from his chest, raw and ragged. He slammed his palm against the table, the glassware rattling, liquid splashing over the edge. His face burned crimson, and fire seared in his blue eyes. He didn't hesitate. At once, Edward scheduled a full urological exam, this time at a top-tier hospital with the most reputable specialists. He needed to tear down the phantom that had haunted him for 8 years. When the doctor placed the results on the desk, Edward sat frozen, barely able to breathe. The physician's calm voice struck like a gavel. You are completely healthy. Your reproductive function is normal. There is no evidence of infertility. Edward leaned back, shutting his eyes. A tidal wave crashed through him. 8 years, reduced to ashes by one counterfeit piece of paper. His life bent, distorted by falsified medical results. Rage erupted inside him. He stormed out of the hospital, his gaze blazing. Pulling out his phone, he dialed only one person. Mike, help me investigate. I want to know who tampered with those results. Within 48 hours, every record was ripped open. Edward unleashed his resources, calling in lawyers, investigators, and the full power of Whitmore Enterprises. Security footage was rewound and replayed. Shift schedules combed over. Suspicious transactions traced in staff bank accounts. One detail after another clicked together like the jagged pieces of a grotesque puzzle. And then the name surfaced, clear, undeniable. Rachel. She had bribed a technician to swap the DNA samples just days ago. The negative report had been nothing but theater. Edward hurled the file onto the table, papers scattering like shrapnel. His jaw locked, veins bulging at his temples. But it didn't end there. He pressed further, digging back 8 years to the original diagnosis, the one that had condemned him to despair. The truth cut like a second blade. The doctor had also been paid off. Another falsified result, another calculated trap, and behind it all, Rachel again. Edward surged to his feet, an animal cornered and furious. His hands gripped the edge of the desk until his knuckles split, blood smearing the wood. His growl reverberated through the empty office. 8 years. For 8 years I lived in the hell she built. He slammed his fist against the desk, the sound thundering like a storm. For 8 years I lost the woman I loved. For 8 years my daughter grew up without a father. And all of it, because of one vile lie. His eyes burned bloodshot, his chest heaving violently. His whole body was a volcano, no longer simmering but ready to erupt, ready to scorch everything in its path. He stared into the office mirror at the stranger who had lived in his place for nearly a decade. His voice dropped low, gravelly, raw. If even the past was built on lies, then what truth is left? In his eyes, a deadly chill gleamed, carrying a vow unspoken yet unbreakable. Rachel would pay. Whitmore Tech's top office glittered through the night. The city below looked like a sea of stars. But inside the suite, the air felt thick and heavy, so dense that even a breath seemed like a burden. Edward stood before the glass, his hands clenched until his knuckles whitened. On the desk behind him, the investigation files lay open. Evidence spread out like an indisputable indictment. The sharp click of heels announced her arrival. Rachel entered, wearing the same composed smile, her brown eyes alight with the familiar confidence. "Edward, I got your message," she said softly, feigning concern. "What's so urgent that you had to call me here?" Edward turned. His gaze held no warmth, only a chilling cold. He pulled the chair opposite his desk forward. "Sit down." Rachel frowned briefly but complied and sat. She was used to Edward's workplace tempers and believed she could still control him. Edward pushed the file across to her. Screenshots, bank transfer records, signatures, and a grainy surveillance clip showing Travis Grant switching the test samples. "Do you have anything to say?" he asked. Rachel looked through the documents. For a moment her face shifted, and then she quickly regained her composure. "Edward, I don't understand. What is all this?" Edward slammed his hand on the desk. The sound exploded through the room. "Don't pretend anymore. I have enough proof. The DNA test is just now, and the infertility diagnosis 8 years ago. Everything was you." Blood drained from Rachel's face. She slid her chair back, lips trembling, then suddenly burst into a harsh, hysterical laugh that echoed through the office. "So it's finally come to this. Edward, you're clever, but it took you 8 years to find out. I thought you'd never figure it out." "Why?" Edward's voice cut out each word, low and ragged like wind through a crack. "Why did you do it?" Rachel tilted her head, a sick, jealous light gleaming in her eyes. "Because I couldn't stand watching you love her. What does Clara have that I don't? She's always been pampered by you, always in the position I craved. Do you know how long I've been at your side? Understanding you, caring for you, sharing your ambitions? And yet your heart belonged to her, a woman with nothing but a gentle smile. Edward's fist tightened, his voice shook with fury. You planted everything out of jealousy? You fabricated evidence to make me believe Clara betrayed me. You turned a doctor into a liar and destroyed my faith in myself. And now you even tampered with the test so I would deny my own daughter. He stepped toward Rachel, his eyes blazing. You stole 8 years from me. You stole the mother of my child. Rachel shrank back but fought to keep a defiant tone. What are you going to do? Leave me. Edward, I sacrificed everything for you. Without me, you would have collapsed in those years. I gave you stability, a woman by your side when you were at your lowest. You owe me. Edward laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Oh? For deceit? For years of emptiness because you made me believe falsified results? You gave me nothing but darkness, Rachel. Rachel hurried to her feet and lunged to grab his hand. Edward, I did it all for love. If you need a family, I will give you one. I can have your child. We can start over. No Clara, no that child. Just you and me. Edward jerked his hand away, eyes full of contempt. You still don't get it, do you? Clara is my family. Emma is my blood. You are the traitor. It hit Rachel like a slap. Her false smile dissolved, leaving only panic and rage. You'll ruin me. Edward, if you expose this, I'll lose everything. My reputation, my career, everything. You can't do that. Edward stood straight, his shadow long across the luxury carpet. His voice rang with finality. No, Rachel. You destroyed yourself. I don't need to do anything. The evidence is here. I will hand it to the police, to the court, to anyone who will make justice speak. Rachel went pale, trembling. Edward, please, don't! He turned to the window and looked out at the city lights. A piece of darkness had been stripped away, he thought, and a part of him felt oddly empty. 8 years ago, you took my love, my faith, and my right to be a father. Now I will take it all back. Clara deserves to know the truth. Emma deserves a family. And you, Rachel, will pay the price. Rachel cried out and lunged for his hand one last time, but Edward didn't look back. He pressed the button to call security. The door opened and 2 security officers entered. Edward pointed at Rachel, voice crisp. Remove her. From this moment on, Rachel Osborne has no standing at Whitmore Tech. Prepare legal files. I want charges filed. Rachel thrashed and screamed in desperation. Edward, you'll regret this. You'll never be free of me. The door closed. Her screams faded down the hall. The office fell silent again, save for Edward's heavy breathing. He glanced down at the open dossier on his desk. 8 years of lies, and finally someone would answer for them. But the feeling in his chest was not triumph, it was a deep ache. If not for Rachel, he and Clara might have lived a very different life. Edward placed a hand over his heart and closed his eyes. In his mind, he saw Emma's bright smile and those blue eyes like his own. He swore with everything left to him to protect the mother and daughter from every remaining shadow. One final question rang out, like an echo from the deepest place within him. Can love be buried for 8 years, and will truth stay buried forever? Edward opened his eyes. Number. Truth had returned, and from tomorrow he would begin again, alongside Clara and Emma, with no lies left to cross their path. The little apartment on a quiet street in Capitol Hill seemed to glow with new hope that night. Edward stepped inside, his hands still trembling from all that had happened. On the sofa, Emma clutched her doll, her wide blue eyes lifted toward him. Beside her sat Clara, frail and pale, her expression caught between surprise and worry at the sight of him. Edward froze in the middle of the room, his chest tightening. He looked at them. The woman he had once loved, and the child he now knew without doubt was his own flesh and blood. His legs felt heavy as stone, but at last he crossed the space and lowered himself beside them. His eyes shimmered, and then he opened his arms wide. Emma, come here to your father. The little girl blinked, her lips parting as if she couldn't believe what she'd heard. Then in a heartbeat, her small legs carried her forward, and she threw herself into Edward's embrace. Daddy, are you really my daddy? Edward wrapped her tight, tears springing hot to his eyes. Yes, sweetheart. I am. I'm so sorry for letting you and your mom suffer alone, for not being there the day you were born. But from today, I promise you, I'll never leave again. Emma broke into sobs, her words choked with joy. I knew it. I knew you were my daddy. Because my eyes are like yours and my smile too. I'm so proud of it. Edward laughed through his tears, clutching her even closer, as though afraid the world might steal her away again if he loosened his hold. Behind them, Clara wept silently. Years of pain and resentment seemed to melt. Edward released Emma and turned to her. Dropping to his knees on the hard floor, he didn't care about anything but her face before him. His voice rough, he told her everything. About Rachel, about the switched results, about the falsified diagnosis. Then he grasped her frail hands. Clara, I'm sorry. I let you endure it all alone. I let you raise our daughter in isolation, battling illness without anyone at your side. Please, forgive me. Clara shook her head. Her face was pale, but her eyes were soft. Edward, I let go of anger long ago. Life is too short to hold on to hatred. All I want is that when I'm gone, you'll take care of Emma. That's enough for me. The words cut into Edward's heart like a blade. He grabbed her thin hands tighter. Don't say that, Clara. You're not going to die. I won't allow it. I'll cover every treatment. I'll take you to the best doctors. You have to live. For her. For us. Clara gave a faint smile, weak but radiant. Edward, you're still the same. Strong. Relentless. But this illness? No! Edward's voice blazed. I'm not just a CEO. Not just a wealthy man. I'm Emma's father and the man who still loves you. I'll fight to the end. By your side. Silence fell for a moment. Clara's tears shimmered as she lifted trembling fingers to his cheek. I've waited 8 years to hear you say that, Edward. Emma stood nearby, her eyes shining like stars as she watched her parents. She spoke up with the fierce determination of a 7-year-old braver than her years. Daddy, Mommy can't die. I'll study hard, I'll behave, I'll help her. But you have to promise me. You'll keep her here with me. Edward pulled them both into his arms, his voice breaking. I promise. We'll be a family. Nothing and no one will ever tear us apart again. The very next morning, Edward arranged for Clara to be admitted to the city's leading hospital. The head of oncology himself took her case, supported by a team of top specialists. Edward signed thick stacks of financial agreements without a second thought. To him, money meant nothing compared to Clara's life. As Clara sat on the hospital bed preparing for her first round of treatment, Edward held her hand, his gaze firm yet full of hope. I'm here. Everything's different now, Clara. You're not alone anymore. Clara nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks, but her smile shone as brightly as it once had in their youth. A few days later, on the playground at her school, Emma ran freely with her friends. Her blue eyes sparkled, her smile radiant. She boasted proudly, Guess what? I have a daddy now. He's amazing, so strong. He's going to save my mommy, and from now on, I'll never be alone again. Her friends cheered in delight. Emma lifted her head high, pride shining in every word. In that moment, she felt like the happiest child in the world. From a distance, Edward stood watching, emotion swelling in his chest until it nearly burst. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but this time, he would not falter. He had found his family again, and he would protect them with every breath left in him. Thank you for being part of Soul Stories. If you're listening on another channel, come back to the official home so you can continue our love journeys together with the Soul Stories family. Edward Whitmore's vast mansion had once been likened to a fortress of ice. White walls, soaring glass windows, marble floors polished to a cold gleam. All of it spoke of distance and emptiness. For years, the only sounds within were his solitary footsteps, hurried meals at a table far too long, and nights drowned in silence, with nothing but the dim glow of a single lamp for company. But ever since Clara and Emma moved in, the air had changed. Every corner of the house seemed brighter, warmer, as if awakening from a long slumber. On the very first morning, Edward descended to the dining room. Instead of the soulless meals prepared by staff, a simple breakfast awaited him. Toast golden at the edges, sunny-side-up eggs, and a few slices of neatly cut fruit, all arranged by Clara's hands. Emma sat waiting, her bright eyes lighting up when she saw him. "Daddy, sit here. I saved this chair for you." Edward smiled, warmth spreading through his chest. He took the seat, and Emma eagerly placed a piece of egg on his plate. "You have to eat a lot so you'll have enough strength to take Mommy to the doctor." Clara looked up, her eyes holding a trace of shyness, yet filled with quiet happiness. Edward only nodded silently. It had been so long since breakfast felt like more than a ritual. It was now the sweet beginning of a new day. At nightfall, Emma lay tucked into her new bedroom, the room Edward had personally decorated, from the soft blue wallpaper to the small bookshelf stacked with fairy tales. "Daddy, will you read to me?" Edward sat at the edge of the bed, taking the storybook she handed him. His voice was low and steady, flowing like a gentle stream. Emma clutched her doll, eyelids drooping, until her breathing evened out in sleep. Edward leaned down, kissed her forehead softly, and lingered, watching her peaceful face. His heart seemed to melt completely. Outside the window, moonlight spilled in a silvery path. From the doorway, Clara stood silently watching. In that quiet moment, she saw the once cold, unyielding man become someone tender, gentle, someone she had almost forgotten he could be. The days slipped by, and the house filled with laughter. Emma darted through the garden, giggling, while Edward chased after her, pretending to catch her. Clara sat on a stone bench, smiling, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. On a weekend evening, the three of them gathered in the living room. Edward made popcorn, Clara picked out a cartoon, and Emma nestled between them under a blanket, laughing out loud at the screen. The mansion that had once been a castle of ice was now a true home. Emma's pure laughter, Clara's gentle gaze, Edward's quiet devotion, all blended into the symphony of family they had been denied for 8 long years. Edward watched them both, silent, his heart torn by regret yet lifted by hope. Could this be the happiness we lost for 8 years? He reached for Clara's hand, and for the first time in years she did not pull away. They sat together, their daughter between them, letting the simple happiness spread across the vast house. A house that was no longer a fortress of ice, but the home of 3. The first light of dawn had barely touched the mist when the storm broke. Online news outlets and social media exploded with scandalous headlines. The ex returns Clara Cromwell, gold digger of millionaire Edward Whitmore. From poverty to a mansion, does Clara love Edward or just his fortune? Outside the Whitmore estate, dozens of reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward like weapons. Cars slowed to a crawl, blocked by the mob. Inside the house that had only just begun to taste peace, Clara stood behind the window, her hands trembling. Emma clutched the hem of her mother's dress, her wide eyes filled with fear. "Mommy, why are they saying those things about you?" the little girl whispered, her voice breaking. Clara bent down, wrapping her arms around her daughter, biting her lip until it nearly bled. Before she could answer, Edward stepped into the room, his eyes burning with a steel resolve. He gently patted Emma's head, then gripped Clara's hand firmly. "Don't be afraid. This is just Rachel's final, desperate trick. I won't let you or Emma suffer another second because of her." That very afternoon, Edward called a sudden press conference in Whitmore Tech's Grand Hall. Before the flashing lights of the media, he laid the truth bare. Documents spread across the table, bank transfers exposed, grainy surveillance footage, and Travis Grant's signed testimony. His voice rang with controlled thunder. "For 8 years, I was deceived by those I once trusted. Falsified medical records stole my family's happiness. Clara Cromwell is not a gold digger. She is the victim of a vile conspiracy, and I, Edward Whitmore, will protect her with everything I have." The hall erupted into chaos, with reporters shouting questions and cameras snapping furiously. But Edward's final words cut through the noise. "All evidence has been handed to the police. The truth will speak louder than lies." That night, Clara stepped out into the garden of the hospital grounds to breathe in the fresh air. A figure emerged from the shadows. Rachel, Her appearance was as polished as ever, silken dress, golden waves of hair, but her eyes burned with madness and despair. Clara froze, startled. "Rachel, why are you here?" Rachel's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "I only wanted to talk. One last time." Clara's sigh carried both sadness and weariness. Despite the betrayal, her gaze still held traces of the friend Rachel had once been. "Why, Rachel? We were best friends. I never tried to take anything from you. Why destroy me like this?" Rachel's voice trembled, fueled by the flames of jealousy long stoked. "Because you always had what I never could. Edward looked at you the way I dreamed he'd look at me. One smile from you, and he'd fall to his knees. I gave him everything, my loyalty, my years. But I was never in his heart." Tears welled in Clara's eyes. "So you stole my happiness instead? You turned a father into a man who believed he was barren, turned me into a traitor, and left a child to grow up without her dad?" Rachel bit her lip until her face contorted. I just wanted Edward for myself. I thought if he hated you, I would finally have my chance. I never realized I'd lose him forever." Clara shook her head, her tears spilling freely. "Love cannot be built on lies, Rachel. What you've gained is nothing but ashes." Rachel faltered, her eyes glazing with the weight of truth. But before another word could pass between them, the wail of police sirens tore through the night. Red and blue lights flared across the garden. Officers strode forward, their voices stern and decisive. "Rachel Osborne, you are under arrest for bribery, falsifying medical evidence, and defamation of character." Clara stepped back as Rachel froze, panic flashing in her eyes. When the officers reached for her, she thrashed violently, her scream splitting the air. "No! You can't arrest me! Everything I did was for love! Edward belongs to me!" Her shrill cries echoed through the garden until the cold bite of handcuffs silenced her struggle. As she was dragged away, Rachel twisted one last time, her wild gaze locked on Clara, who stood unmoving, a single tear tracing down her cheek. Later that night, Edward returned home. He found Clara in the living room, Emma asleep against her side. Clara looked up, her eyes still damp with grief. Edward sat beside her and wrapped his arms around them both. "The darkness is over now, Clara. From this moment on, there will only be light for you and Emma." Clara leaned into his shoulder, her voice soft, fragile. "I only hope that's true." In the warmth of his embrace, Emma stirred in her sleep, a small smile curving her lips. And Edward knew, deep within his soul, though the past had been drowned in shadows, the light had finally returned, radiant, enduring, eternal. Spring arrived with gentle rays of sunlight, as if the world itself wanted to bless a new beginning. In the hospital room flooded with morning light, Clara sat by the window with a slim book in her hands. Her hair, once fallen away through endless treatments, now sprouted in soft, glistening strands under the sun. Her complexion was rosier, her emerald eyes glowing with renewed life. Emma burst through the door, her small arms wrapping tightly around her mother, her voice bubbling with delight. "Mommy, your hair is growing back. You look just like a princess." Clara laughed, gathering her daughter into her arms. She drew in a long, steady breath, her chest filled with a vitality she had once thought she would never feel again. Edward entered moments later, carrying a bouquet of scarlet tulips. He froze at the sight of Clara's radiant smile. You're beautiful, Clara." The simple words held joy, gratitude, and awe. He set the bouquet on the table and leaned down to press a gentle kiss to her forehead. For that moment, the world fell away, leaving only the three of them, bound by the fragile but powerful thread of happiness. The days that followed were filled with hope. Each morning, the family gathered for breakfast under the veranda, the chirping of birds above weaving into their laughter. Edward brewed Clara's coffee. Emma carefully peeled fruit for her mother. The once icy mansion now brimmed with warmth, every corner echoing with love. One evening, Clara sat on the sofa reading a story aloud to Emma, her voice soft and melodic. Edward lingered in the doorway watching them. His chest tightened as memories surfaced. 8 years lost to lies. 8 years Clara had struggled alone. 8 years Emma had grown without him. At last, he stepped forward, sitting beside Clara. His voice was rough, breaking with emotion. Clara, I'm sorry. I let 8 precious years slip away. 8 years I wasn't there for you, or for her. Clara looked up, her eyes shimmering, but no longer carrying reproach. Edward, the past is gone. What matters is that we are here now, together. He took her fragile, warm hand and squeezed it as though sealing a vow. I swear, I will make it up to you and Emma. From this day forward, every moment of my life will be devoted to protecting, loving, and cherishing you both. Emma sat up suddenly, her eyes glowing like twin sapphires. Daddy, Mommy, does that mean we'll always be together? Edward and Clara laughed, pulling their daughter into their arms. Yes, Emma, this is what family means. On the day Clara was discharged, the sun blazed golden across the city. She stepped out of the hospital gates in a simple dress, her new hair lifting in the breeze. Emma skipped ahead, shouting with uncontainable joy, Mommy's all better! Daddy, let's go home now! Edward walked behind them, his gaze locked on Clara's every step. His heart swelled with gratitude. He knew the miracle he had been given, to hold the hands of the two people who mattered most and walk forward with them. As they drove, Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, her whisper fragile, yet filled with wonder. I never thought I would live to see this day. Edward's reply was steady, resolute. Believe it, Clara. Love itself kept you here, and I will never let you go again. From the back seat, Emma hugged her favorite doll tight, her blue eyes shimmering. She whispered almost to herself, but loud enough for them to hear. I have a daddy. I have a mommy. I'm the happiest girl in the world. That night, they sat together in the garden. Moonlight spilled silver over the flowers, the breeze carrying the fragrance of spring. Edward laid his hand over Clara's, meeting her gaze with solemn devotion. 8 years of darkness are behind us. From today on, every day will be light. I will spend the rest of my life proving the love I have for you and for Emma. Clara's lips curved into a trembling smile, her eyes glistening. She didn't need grand promises, just this moment. Edward was by her side, Emma is in her arms, and the belief that their happiness would never be stolen again. Beneath the gentle moonlight, they sat together. 3 souls once torn apart by lies, now bound again by a single miracle, the miracle of love. A year had passed since Clara began her new treatment. Time itself seemed to have worked a miracle. Her health had returned. Her skin glowed with color, her hair flowed softly to her shoulders, and her green eyes shone with the calm brilliance of autumn lakes. Every time Clara smiled, Edward felt his heart twist, a pang of regret, but also an overwhelming gratitude. He had once lost her, and he swore never to let it happen again. That evening, the sky blazed with hues of gold as the sun sank into the horizon. The 3 of them strolled along a quiet beach where waves lapped gently and the salty breeze curled through the air. Emma ran ahead, singing as she scooped shells into her little hands. Edward held Clara's hand tightly, his heart pounding, because he knew the moment he had waited for was finally here. He stopped, pulling Clara closer. She looked up, surprised, her eyes reflecting the fiery orange glow of the setting sun. Edward drew a long breath, then lowered himself to one knee in the soft sand, opening a small velvet box. Inside, a diamond ring sparkled as if it had captured the very light of the sky. Clara? His voice trembled, but his resolve was clear. I lost 8 years of my life. 8 years where you carried everything alone. I cannot change the past, but I want to give you the rest of my days to make it right. Be my wife. Let me stand beside you, not only as Emma's father, but as the man of your life. Clara gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, tears cascading down her cheeks. Edward's words tore through old wounds, but then sealed them with sincerity and love. Edward, Her voice broke, but then she nodded, tears glittering like jewels as they fell. Yes, I will. At once, Emma came dashing over, her eyes alight like 2 stars. Mommy said yes. Then we're really a family now. She clapped her hands and jumped up and down, her laughter carrying across the beach. Edward slipped the ring onto Clara's finger, then rose and drew both of them into his arms. Against the painted sky, Their three figures merged into one, a portrait of love so breathtaking it seemed carved into eternity. A few months later, their wedding took place in a garden overflowing with white roses, golden lights twinkling like fallen stars. It was not extravagant, not ostentatious, only warm, intimate, and filled with love. Clara walked down the aisle in a gown of pure white, her hair flowing softly, her smile radiant. Edward took her hand, his eyes brimming with pride and devotion. Emma, the flower girl, wore a dress of billowing tulle, scattering petals into the air as she cheered, "Mommy, Daddy! Now we'll be a family forever!" The laughter, the applause, the music, all of it wove together into a memory that would never fade. Beyond the celebration, justice had also been served. Rachel, charged with bribery and falsifying medical evidence, now faced a harsh sentence. Newspapers ran endless headlines. The image of the once elegant woman now existed only as a convict in prison attire. Dr. Muller, the physician who had aided in forging Edward's infertility report 8 years earlier, had his license permanently revoked. The truth was finally out, and the last shadows had been swept away. In Emma's room, one wall was adorned with something precious. Clara's crumpled letter, the very one Emma had bravely carried into Whitmore Tech on that fateful day, now framed behind glass. Emma proudly showed it to every friend who visited. "This is the most important letter in the world. Because of it, Daddy found me, Mommy found love again, and now we're a family." Clara's eyes glistened whenever she heard her daughter tell the story. Edward would slip an arm around her shoulders and whisper, "It wasn't just the letter. It was your love and your courage that changed everything." On the night after the wedding, Edward led Clara onto the balcony overlooking the garden, where moonlight shimmered over a sea of roses. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, his voice soft against her ear. "One letter changed 3 lives, but what truly binds us together is love." Clara turned, resting her forehead against his shoulder, her smile trembling through tears of joy. "I believe that, Edward, and I know now we'll never lose each other again." Beneath the canopy of stars in the arms of the man she loved, Clara closed her eyes and let her heart beat in rhythm with his. Inside the house, Emma slept soundly, clutching the framed letter, the eternal proof of love, courage, and a child's faith that had changed everything. And so the story closed, not with an ending, but with a beginning, the beginning of a family of happiness and of love everlasting.